Watch as Jasmine Crockett unleashes chaos on Bill Maher's show. What starts as a calm interview spirals into a fiery meltdown, personal attacks, lost credibility, and a career on the line. Don't miss the explosive moments that left everyone stunned. It was supposed to be another typical segment on Real Time with Bill Maher, an insightful conversation with a rising political star. But the moment Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere shifted. The audience, expecting a lively discussion about social issues, was in for a surprise. Instead of the usual handshake and pleasantries, there was tension in the air. Bill Maher, the master of political satire, greeted Jasmine with his usual charm, ready to guide her through a conversation on her views and political passions. But Jasmine, already on edge, wasn't interested in the soft introductions. Instead, she opened with a statement that shocked both Bill and the live audience. "Don't think for a second, Bill, that you actually care about these issues," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You just want to have me on your show to check off a diversity box. This isn't about the truth. It's all a performance for you." The room fell silent. Bill's eyebrows raised, but he didn't miss a beat. He was no stranger to heated debates and difficult guests. This, however, was different. A subtle tension had already started brewing between the two, and it was clear that Jasmine wasn't here for a civil conversation. Instead, she came armed with a sharp edge, ready to take on what she saw as the hypocrisy of the show and its host. Bill, ever the professional, attempted to smooth things over with his trademark humor. He replied, "I'm genuinely interested in hearing your perspective. That's why I invited you here." But Jasmine wasn't having it. She leaned forward, eyes narrowed, her posture tense. "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped back. "You bring people like me on your show to pretend you care about diversity and inclusion, but it's all for the cameras. You're no different from the rest of them, pretending to care while doing nothing." The tension was palpable. Bill, whose career had been built on navigating tricky interviews, was now faced with a guest who wasn't interested in discourse. She was interested in confrontation. The studio audience, expecting a spirited but respectful debate, exchanged uneasy glances. No one had expected this level of hostility so early in the interview. Bill, remaining calm, tried again. "Jasmine, I'm just asking what drives your passion for public service. I want to understand what motivates you." But Jasmine wasn't interested in providing a thoughtful answer. Instead, she doubled down, calling out Bill for being part of the problem. "You don't care about these issues. You just want to make yourself look good while people like me suffer. You're a fake progressive, Bill." At that moment, it was clear. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was a battle of egos. Jasmine had walked onto the set with a chip on her shoulder, determined to take on Bill Maher and his platform, no matter the cost. As the cameras rolled and the tension mounted, the audience realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The usual banter, the political back and forth that made Bill's show famous, was replaced by a fiery confrontation that had no clear resolution in sight. What was supposed to be a straightforward conversation was spiraling into something much darker. As the studio buzzed with discomfort, Bill Maher, the seasoned host, tried to regain control of the rapidly escalating situation. He was no stranger to contentious debates and fiery exchanges, but the aggression from Jasmine Crockett was unlike anything he'd experienced before. He had been on television for decades, guiding some of the most high-profile political figures through tense interviews, yet this moment felt different. Bill, ever the professional, leaned back in his chair, his hands steady on the desk. His expression shifted from surprise to a quiet resolve. This was his show, and he knew how to handle difficult guests. He had done it thousands of times. His first instinct was to stay calm, keep his cool, and try to redirect the conversation. "Jasmine, let's slow down for a second," Bill said, his tone measured but firm. "I brought you here because I believe you have an important perspective to share. This show isn't about me, it's about giving people like you a platform to talk about the issues that matter." But Jasmine wasn't interested in playing along. Her eyes flashed with contempt as she leaned forward, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "That's the problem, Bill," she shot back, her words dripping with sarcasm. "You say you want a conversation, but all you're really interested in is pushing your own narrative. You don't care about the issues. You care about ratings. You care about looking like the progressive hero, while people like me are fighting real battles out here." The tension in the room thickened. Bill could feel the walls closing in. The studio, once filled with the usual energy and anticipation of live television, now felt heavy, stifling. The crew, the audience, they all seemed uncertain how to respond to Jasmine's unrelenting attack. "I'm not here to perform, Jasmine," Bill said, his voice maintaining its cool edge. "I'm here to discuss important issues. You don't have to like me or agree with everything I say, but I'm genuinely trying to have a discussion with you. This isn't about me. It's about what's happening in this country." Bill paused for a moment, hoping to bring the conversation back to some semblance of civil discourse. He wanted to give Jasmine a chance to articulate her views, to show the audience the substance behind her words. But Jasmine wasn't ready to engage on those terms. Instead, she doubled down. "You're just another rich, out-of-touch celebrity pretending to care about the real issues. You sit in your ivory tower and mock people like me who are actually out there fighting for change," Jasmine fired back, her voice rising with every word. Bill's patience, which had been unwavering up to this point, was beginning to fray at the edges. He had been trying to navigate this conversation with grace, but Jasmine wasn't interested in civil debate. This was no longer about politics, it was about personal animosity, and Bill could feel it creeping into the air. "I've spent my career having tough conversations with people from all sides of the aisle," Bill said, his voice more pointed now. "If you're here to have a real discussion, we can do that. But if you're here to just attack me personally, this isn't going to work." The moment hung in the air, charged with tension. Bill was trying to salvage what little remained of the interview, but Jasmine seemed more determined than ever to derail it. The next few minutes would prove to be pivotal in this already explosive exchange. Would Bill be able to steer the conversation back on track, or was this interview doomed from the start? The atmosphere in the studio was now thick with tension. Bill Maher, who had spent decades deftly managing heated debates and combative guests, was now struggling to maintain control of a conversation that had quickly spiraled into chaos. His attempts to redirect the discussion and bring it back to the issues at hand had been met with outright hostility from Jasmine Crockett. The audience, initially expectant and eager for a meaningful political conversation, sat in stunned silence, unsure of how to react. Jasmine, sitting across from Bill, had long since stopped pretending to play by the rules of a typical interview. She wasn't interested in discussing her policies, her passion for public service, or the topics she'd hoped to highlight during her appearance. Instead, she was fixated on her personal grievances. "You think you can just sit there, Bill?" Jasmine snapped, her voice sharp as she leaned forward, pointing directly at him. "You think you can control the narrative? Well, I'm not playing your game. I'm not here to be your token guest, to check your diversity box, and then pretend like everything's fine. This is real life, Bill. This is people out there dying, and you sit here making jokes." Bill, still trying to steer the conversation back to a more constructive path, remained composed. His posture shifted slightly, his demeanor calm but with a hint of frustration seeping through. "Jasmine, I'm not here to mock anyone, and I'm not trying to control the narrative. I asked you to come here because I thought you had something valuable to say. I respect your perspective, but right now, we're not talking about anything." But Jasmine wasn't having it. She was far past the point of engaging in civil discourse. She was now determined to make Bill the target of her fury. "You can sit there all smug, Bill, but we both know this is all for show. You don't care about real change. You don't care about the struggles of people who actually need help. You only care about how you look on television." Her words were a direct blow to Bill's usual calm and measured approach. The usual banter, the back and forth that characterized Bill's show, had been replaced with sharp accusations and an almost palpable anger. Bill, to his credit, didn't lash out. Instead, he took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing as he prepared for what was coming next. "You want to talk about real issues, Jasmine?" Bill said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Then let's talk about real issues. But we can't do that if you're just here to tear me down personally. We're not getting anywhere." The tension between them grew, and the air in the studio seemed to thicken with every exchange. The cameras continued to roll, but even the crew seemed unsure how to handle what was unfolding. Bill's usual charm and wit, which had disarmed so many others in the past, wasn't working on Jasmine. Instead of trying to find common ground or even engage in meaningful dialogue, Jasmine continued to escalate the situation. "I'm not here for you to lecture me, Bill," Jasmine retorted, her voice rising again. "You think you're some kind of progressive hero, but you're just a part of the problem. You can sit there with your high and mighty attitude, but you're no better than anyone else. And I'm done playing nice." At that point, it was clear. This interview was no longer about policy, politics, or meaningful conversation. It had become a battle of egos. Jasmine's refusal to engage on any substantive level, combined with her personal attacks on Bill, was threatening to derail not just the interview, but her entire public persona. Bill's patience, already worn thin, began to show cracks. The public, who had tuned in to hear a discussion about important issues, were now witnessing something much darker. What was supposed to be a platform for ideas had descended into chaos. By now, the tension in the studio was palpable. The audience, initially excited for what was expected to be a lively political discussion, had been left in shock as Jasmine Crockett's explosive behavior turned the interview into a spectacle of personal attacks and vitriol. What was supposed to be a calm conversation about important social issues had devolved into an all-out verbal brawl. But amidst the chaos, Bill Maher, the seasoned host known for his sharp wit and no-nonsense approach, remained steadfast. As Jasmine's words became sharper and more hostile, Bill knew the stakes were rising. This wasn't just about debating policy or political ideologies anymore. This was about keeping control of his show, maintaining the integrity of the conversation, and ensuring that the audience still saw the value in his platform. Despite being personally attacked and having his professionalism questioned, Bill stuck to his guns. "Jasmine, I'm going to give you one last chance to sit down and have a civilized conversation," Bill said, his tone now firm but calm. "I've tried to listen to you, but you've been attacking me personally from the start. Let's get back to the issues. What are the real problems you want to address? What can we do to fix this?" But Jasmine, refusing to back down, shot back with even more intensity. "You think you can just silence me with your civilized talk? This whole show is a joke. You're a part of the system that keeps people like me down. You bring me on here just to make yourself look good. You don't actually care about change." The audience was visibly uncomfortable, many shifting in their seats, unsure whether to applaud or remain silent. Bill, however, was unflappable. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment, but Bill never lost his composure. This was his show, and he wasn't about to let Jasmine's storm derail it. "I'm not silencing you, Jasmine," Bill replied, his voice unwavering. "You're here because I thought you had something important to say. But if you're not willing to have a respectful conversation, then this interview is going to end. It's that simple." The fact that Bill had maintained his professionalism despite the relentless barrage of personal attacks spoke volumes. He wasn't just the host of a late-night talk show, he was a master at navigating difficult situations. And in this moment, he proved that composure under pressure is more powerful than any verbal exchange. What Jasmine failed to understand was that Bill wasn't just playing for the cameras, he was playing for the truth. His entire career had been built on the idea of having tough conversations, giving a platform to voices from all sides, and engaging in meaningful, if sometimes heated, dialogue. But there's a limit to how much you can do when the other party refuses to engage. The studio audience, who had initially been uncertain about where this conversation was heading, now seemed to rally behind Bill's professionalism. The contrast between his calm, controlled demeanor and Jasmine's escalating hostility couldn't have been clearer. The question now wasn't whether Jasmine was right or wrong about her views. It was whether her approach to advocacy, her refusal to engage in civil discourse, was damaging her more than her political enemies ever could. The drama that unfolded on Bill Maher's stage wasn't just an interview gone wrong. It was a career-altering moment that would forever define Jasmine Crockett. By the time the situation reached its boiling point, the entire studio was in a state of disbelief. What was meant to be a platform for political discourse had been hijacked by chaos, and it was clear to everyone watching that Jasmine's credibility was unraveling before their eyes. Despite Bill Maher's repeated attempts to redirect the conversation and steer it back toward the issues, Jasmine refused to let go of her personal vendetta. She wasn't interested in discussing policy, offering solutions, or engaging in productive debate. Instead, she was on a mission to dismantle Bill's show, his career, and anyone who dared question her. Her refusal to even attempt a civil conversation was becoming her undoing. The tipping point came when Bill, who had patiently endured every attack, made one final attempt to salvage what was left of the interview. His patience, once rock-solid, was now fraying, and the weight of the moment was starting to show. "Jasmine," Bill said, his voice finally tinged with a trace of frustration, "I've given you every opportunity to have a real conversation here. But if you're not willing to engage, then this interview is over." At that, Jasmine stood up abruptly, her movements erratic. The studio went still as she towered over the desk, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can just shut me down, Bill? You think you can silence me because I'm not playing by your rules? This is exactly what you do. You pretend to be progressive, but you're just a part of the problem." The cameras zoomed in, capturing her every word, every gesture, as if to punctuate the self-destruction that was unfolding. The audience, once hopeful for a meaningful discussion, now watched in stunned silence, some with their mouths agape, others squirming in discomfort. Even Bill seemed taken aback by the intensity of the moment, but he remained resolute. "I'm not silencing you, Jasmine," Bill responded, his voice measured but firm. "You're silencing yourself. You came here with an opportunity to speak your mind, to share your views with millions of people. But instead of having a conversation, you chose to attack me personally, and now you're pushing the limits of what's acceptable on this show." Jasmine, however, wasn't done. She moved toward the camera, her eyes wild with emotion, and shouted, "This is what fake progressivism looks like. This is how they silence people who don't play by their rules. Remember this moment." The security personnel, who had been standing on the edge of the set, were now making their way toward her. But Jasmine wasn't backing down. She continued to shout, her words growing more frantic. "You think you're better than everyone else, Bill? You think you're untouchable? Watch what happens when someone refuses to play along with your little game." As the security team approached to escort her off the set, Jasmine's defiance reached its peak. She was escorted out of the studio, still shouting, her voice echoing through the silent room. Bill, visibly drained, turned to the camera with a sigh, his face pale but composed. "That was unprecedented," Bill said, addressing both the audience and the millions watching at home. "I've been doing this for years, but I've never had a guest come on with the sole intention of turning everything into a personal attack." In the aftermath, the internet exploded with reactions. Political commentators, viewers, and critics were all in agreement. Jasmine had gone too far. Instead of seizing the opportunity to discuss important issues, she had alienated herself from the very platform she had been given. Her political career, once full of promise, was now marred by a meltdown that would be replayed endlessly across social media. For Jasmine, the damage was done. What started as an opportunity to elevate her message had turned into a cautionary tale about the dangers of emotional volatility, personal attacks, and the importance of controlling one's narrative when given the spotlight. The takeaway from this disaster was clear. No matter how strong your views may be, if you can't communicate them effectively, if you can't engage in civil discourse, you risk losing everything. And Jasmine Crockett's career would never be the same again. Stay tuned as we continue to follow the fallout from this explosive moment.